So, here's the deal. Life doesn't always knock politely. Sometimes it slams the door, sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it gives you one shot, one moment. That decides everything. Most people shrug it off, laugh it away, pretend they didn't see it. But that's the trap. You ignore it, and the ground slips out from under you. You think you've got time. You think chances repeat, but they don't. One wrong move, one blind eye, and suddenly everything you thought was safe starts crumbling. Small warnings carry big consequences. That's the trick, isn't it? Everyone's waiting for disaster to announce itself with fireworks, with alarms blaring, with a neon sign that says, "Danger ahead." But life doesn't work like that. It never does. The biggest disasters, the ones that rip your life apart, they start small. They come as little cracks in the wall, whispers in the dark, a faint itch in the back of your mind. You brush them off, call them nothing, convince yourself they don't matter. And then one day, that tiny little crack has spread so far, the whole thing comes crashing down. And you swear you never saw it coming. But you did. You just ignored it. The world is full of warnings, but most people are too comfortable to pay attention. They mistake silence for safety. They mistake stillness for stability. But silence hides signals, and stability is fragile. That uneasy feeling in your chest, the subtle shift in the air, the quiet voice that tells you something's off. That's not paranoia. That's a warning. And when you ignore it, you pay. Because life doesn't waste energy shouting at people who don't listen. It just whispers once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then it delivers the consequence. And by then, it's too late to undo. Think about how many people lose everything, not because of one huge mistake, but because of dozens of little ones they ignored. The little compromises, the red flags they laughed away, the choices they told themselves they'd fix later. All those small warnings added up, stacking on top of each other until they became a mountain too heavy to move. And when it finally collapses, it looks like sudden destruction. But it wasn't sudden. It was patient. It was building while you were looking the other way. That's the danger of ignoring the small things. They don't scream, so you think they don't matter. You tell yourself, "I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'll fix it later. It's just one time." But warnings don't care about your excuses. They're signals, not suggestions. They're reality tapping you on the shoulder, testing if you're awake. And if you prove you're not, reality doesn't keep tapping. It pushes you face first into the ground. The little things always matter more than people want to admit. The tone in someone's voice when they're drifting away. The hesitation before you make a choice you know is wrong. The moment you feel tired but keep pushing anyway. These are signals. They're not random. They're messages. Ignore them long enough, and they turn into pain, loss, regret. Because the universe has one rule. What you ignore doesn't disappear. It grows. And here's the cruel part. Small warnings don't just vanish when you dismiss them. They pile up. They compound. The consequence always arrives bigger than the warning. You ignore a whisper, you get a shout. You ignore the shout. You get an explosion. By the time the explosion hits, you're left wondering why everything fell apart, when in reality, it started with that tiny signal you brushed off weeks, months, even years ago. The truth is, nothing destroys a person faster than arrogance. The arrogance of thinking you can ignore the signs and get away with it. The arrogance of thinking you've got time, that you're in control, that consequences only happen to other people. But the cracks don't care about your confidence. They keep spreading whether you believe in them or not. And when the wall falls, it doesn't ask if you're ready. It just crushes everything beneath it. Small warnings carry big consequences because they're not optional. They're invitations to act, to pay attention, to shift before the collapse. Most people won't because small feels safe. Small feels ignorable. But that's the trick. The danger doesn't come when it's big. The danger comes when it's small, when it's quiet, when you're least expecting it. By the time it's big, it's already too late. Missed chances don't return. That's the cruel joke of life. You think opportunities are like buses. Miss one, another comes along. Maybe in the small things, sure. But the big ones, the ones that could change everything, they don't circle back. They knock once, maybe twice if you're lucky. And if you're too distracted, too stubborn, too blind to answer, they vanish. And when they vanish, they don't just leave quietly. They take something from you. The future you could have had. The version of yourself that might have lived differently if you had just moved when the door was open. People fool themselves with the idea of next time. Next time I'll be ready. Next time I'll be braver. Next time I'll listen. But there is no guarantee of a next time. Sometimes the moment is the moment, and once it's gone, it doesn't repeat. That relationship you ignored, that chance you laughed off, that risk you didn't take, they don't line up again on your doorstep. You might find something else, but it won't be the same. You'll spend years trying to patch the hole of the chance you lost, and the cruel part is, you'll know deep down that it was your choice. Missed chances leave scars you can't erase. You replay them in your head at night, telling yourself you were right. You were smart. You were protecting yourself. But eventually the truth creeps in. You realize it wasn't wisdom, it was fear. Not patience, but hesitation. And the world doesn't reward hesitation. It punishes it. Opportunities don't stand still while you decide if you're worthy. They move, with or without you. And once they're gone, they don't wait for your apology. That's why regret is heavier than failure. Failure at least teaches you something. You tried, you fought, you learned. But a missed chance, it teaches you nothing but what you could have had. It burns. Because you'll never know what might have been if you had just stepped forward. People don't regret what they did half as much as they regret what they didn't do. Silence eats louder than mistakes. And here's the trick. Opportunities rarely look obvious. They don't come wrapped in gold with a sign saying, "This is your shot." They come disguised. They come at inconvenient times, in uncomfortable ways, when you don't feel ready. And that's why so many miss them. They're too busy waiting for perfect conditions, the right moment, the safe path. But perfect doesn't exist. Readiness is a lie. If you wait until you feel ready, the chance will already be gone. Missed chances don't return because they're not random. They're tailored. That door that opened was meant for you at that exact time, with all your flaws, fears, and doubts included. If you ignore it, it doesn't get reassigned like a package. It dissolves. Maybe another door will open down the road, but it won't lead to the same place. And you'll always wonder what was behind the first one. People comfort themselves by saying, "Everything happens for a reason." Sure, maybe, but not every reason is a gift. Sometimes the reason is punishment. The reason is a lesson carved deep into your bones, so you'll never forget how it felt to let the moment slip away. The reason is to remind you that hesitation is expensive, and you're the one who pays the bill. The harsh truth is, most people won't lose everything in one dramatic collapse. They'll lose it piece by piece, chance by chance, by letting doors close quietly while they stood frozen on the threshold. And then they'll wake up one day realizing their life is smaller than it should have been, not because fate was cruel, but because they ignored the knock when it came. Missed chances don't return, because they were never meant to wait for someone too scared to answer. Comfort blinds you to danger. That's the sweet poison, isn't it? You get cozy, you get used to the softness of the pillow, the warmth of the routine, and you start convincing yourself that everything is fine. The edges blur, the alarms fade, and suddenly the cage feels like a home. People don't notice how dangerous comfort is because it doesn't look like a threat. It looks like safety. It feels like peace. But really, it's a trap dressed in velvet, and the more you sink into it, the harder it becomes to climb out when the fire starts spreading. Comfort numbs you. It takes the sharpness out of your instincts. You stop looking for cracks in the walls because you tell yourself there aren't any. You ignore the strange sound in the distance, the uneasy shift in the air, because comfort whispers, "Don't worry, you're fine." And the more you listen, the more blind you become. Danger doesn't need to scream at someone who's asleep. It just waits. Because when you're too comfortable, you won't even see it until it's already wrapped around your throat. That's how people lose everything. Not because the threat was invisible, but because they chose not to see it. They were too busy clutching their little blanket of comfort, pretending the world outside couldn't touch them. They forget that comfort is fragile. It doesn't shield you. It distracts you. And when the storm comes, comfort is the first thing ripped away, leaving you exposed, unprepared. Weak from all the time you spent sitting still instead of sharpening your edge. The truth is, nothing kills more dreams, more relationships, more futures than comfort. It whispers, "Stay here. Don't move. You've done enough." And people listen, thinking they're safe, thinking the danger will pass them by. But the danger feeds on that stillness. It grows stronger while you grow weaker. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're trapped in chains you built yourself. Comfort isn't protection. It's paralysis. And the cruelest part, comfort feels earned. You tell yourself you deserve to rest, to relax, to finally breathe. And maybe you do for a moment. But when that moment stretches into days, weeks, years, it transforms into something else. It stops being rest and becomes decay. Muscles that aren't used grow soft. Instincts that aren't sharpened grow dull. Fire that isn't fed goes out. Comfort blinds you to all of it because it wraps the decay in sweetness. So you don't notice you're rotting until it's too late. Look at anyone who's fallen hard. The warning signs were always there. The cracks in the system, the flaws in the relationship, the weaknesses in the plan. But comfort convinced them not to look too closely. It's fine. Comfort says, don't stress, don't worry, just enjoy. And they did, until the cracks split wide open and swallowed everything they had. Comfort isn't your friend. It's the soft hand covering your eyes while the knife creeps closer. The world punishes the comfortable. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, because comfort is unnatural. Life is movement, growth, struggle, adaptation. When you stop moving, when you stop pushing, when you settle into the soft cushions and tell yourself the fight is over, you're already falling behind. The danger doesn't need to outrun you. It just needs to wait while you sit still, blind and smiling, until it's too late to get back up. Comfort blinds you, not because it steals your sight, but because it convinces you there's nothing to see. And that lie is more dangerous than any storm, because at least with a storm, you know to run. With comfort, you stay put, smiling, until the floodwaters rise above your head. Ignoring truth destroys stability. That's the trick about lies. They don't need to be huge to ruin you. A small one, whispered enough times, becomes the foundation you start building on. And at first, it feels solid. You walk on it, you rest on it. You convince yourself it'll hold. But the truth doesn't care about what you believe. It waits. It presses against the cracks, and sooner or later, the whole thing collapses, dragging you down with it. Stability built on denial is nothing more than a house of cards, and one breath of reality will send it crashing. People think they can outsmart the truth, outrun it, bury it under enough noise and distractions, and for a while it works. They laugh, they smile, they pretend the foundation is unshakable, but inside they know. That knowing in the gut, that sleepless night, that quiet voice reminding them something's wrong. That's the truth knocking. And when you keep ignoring it, the knocking doesn't stop. It grows heavier, more violent, until it breaks down the door. And by then, the damage is worse than it had to be. Stability doesn't come from pretending. It doesn't come from looking the other way. It comes from facing the ugly, the uncomfortable, the inconvenient. But people avoid that because they'd rather cling to the illusion. It feels easier to pretend things are fine, to tell themselves the cracks aren't there. The problem is, illusions don't hold weight. They crumble under pressure. And when they crumble, they don't just fall quietly. They take everything with them. That's why so many lives collapse without warning. Not because the collapse was sudden, but because the truth was ignored for too long. Every ignored red flag, every dismissed warning, every lie you told yourself, it all piles up. And when the truth finally breaks through, it doesn't just crack the surface, it rips apart the entire structure. You don't just lose balance. You lose everything you thought was holding you steady. Ignoring the truth doesn't erase it. It multiplies it. The more you push it away, the louder it comes back. The more you bury it, the deeper it roots. And when it finally rises, it's stronger, meaner, harder to deal with. That's why people end up shocked when their world collapses. They act like it came out of nowhere, but deep down they knew. They just didn't want to deal with it when it was small. So it grew into something they couldn't escape. And here's the cruel part: the truth doesn't need your permission. It doesn't care about your denial, your excuses, your carefully built story. It stands unshaken. While your lies wobble and fall, you can ignore it for a season, but eventually it demands payment. And the longer you've ignored it, the higher the price. People lose relationships, jobs, families, futures. Not because the truth wasn't there, but because they thought ignoring it would keep them safe. It never does. Stability isn't about comfort. It isn't about telling yourself everything's fine. It's about building on something that won't crack under weight. And the only thing strong enough to hold is the truth. Ugly or not, hard or not, inconvenient or not, the truth is solid. Everything else is quicksand. You can stand on lies for a while, maybe even dance on them, but eventually they give way. And when they do, they don't just swallow you. They swallow everything you built on top of them. Ignoring truth destroys stability because it rots the foundation while you're busy decorating the walls. You think the house is strong because it looks good, but deep down it's hollow. And when the storm hits, it doesn't matter how nice the paint is. It doesn't matter how much you smiled while you were pretending. The foundation gives out, and the whole thing collapses, leaving you standing in the rubble of your own denial. Every decision shifts the future. People like to believe their choices are small, harmless, forgettable, but that's the biggest joke of all. You move one piece on the board, and suddenly the whole game changes. A word you speak, a step you take, a door you open or slam shut, it all echoes. Maybe not right away, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually those echoes bounce back, and when they do, they shape the life you're standing in. The scariest part. Most don't even notice the shift until it's too late to walk it back. It's easy to shrug and say, "It doesn't matter." That's how people excuse themselves when they cut corners, when they walk away, when they choose the easy road instead of the right one. But nothing is isolated. Every decision has teeth, and those teeth bite sooner or later. What feels like a tiny choice now grows into a chain reaction, leading you places you never thought you'd go. That's why life feels unpredictable, because people forget they're the ones pushing the dominoes. Think about it. A single, yes, can rewrite the entire script. A single no can save you or destroy you. The friends you keep, the risks you take, the lies you tell yourself, the truth you avoid. It all adds weight to the future. And that future bends under it, reshaping itself with every move you make. One wrong step doesn't just trip you. It reroutes the entire path ahead. You can't always see it in the moment, but later, when you look back, the pattern is obvious. Every crack in the mirror started with one fracture. Every collapse started with one choice. The mind tricks you into thinking only the big decisions matter. Marriage, career, money, the kind of choices people label as life-changing. But the truth is, it's the small ones. The words you speak when you're angry, the effort you skip because you're tired, the time you waste because you think you've got plenty left, that shape the future just as much. Futures aren't built in giant leaps. They're carved slowly, choice by choice, until you realize you've created a reality you either love or hate. And here's where it gets dangerous. You never know which decision carries the most weight. That's why people regret. They look back at something small, something they thought was meaningless, and realize it shifted everything. That one ignored opportunity. That one careless mistake. That one conversation they didn't have. Regret is just the recognition that decisions bend time, and you bent it in the wrong direction. But by then, the future's already shifted, and you're standing in the wreckage of your own choices. Every decision you make pulls something closer and pushes something else away. That's the law of it. You can't choose one road without abandoning another. You can't say yes without killing a no. You can't avoid a choice without still making one, because even doing nothing is a decision, and it carries just as much weight. That's the part most people don't get. They think staying still protects them, keeps the future safe. But the future doesn't stay still. It moves, with or without you. And your hesitation becomes the decision that shapes it. The world is nothing but a chain of outcomes, tied together by every action, every word, every hesitation. That's why chaos spreads so easily, because people don't realize how much power they carry in a single moment. You don't need to blow up the bridge to change the future. You just need to take the wrong step while crossing it. That's all it takes. And suddenly, you're not where you thought you'd be. Suddenly, everything is different. Every decision shifts the future because life is fragile and direction is everything. You're either bending time toward strength or weakness, toward growth or decay, toward freedom or chains. But one thing is certain, nothing stays the same. The moment you choose, the world rearranges itself around that choice. And you're left walking through the world you created, whether you meant to or not. So, you're looking for signs, aren't you? Clues, whispers, little nudges from the universe telling you this one is different. Funny thing about people, they beg for confirmation. But when it comes, they doubt it, tear it apart, search for flaws until they convince themselves it's a trick. But when it's real, when it's meant, it doesn't need glitter or thunder. It just sits there, quietly undeniable. No matter how much you try to run from it, you feel it in the stillness, in the way your chaos finally slows down, in the way everything broken in you suddenly makes sense standing next to them. Signs repeat until you notice. That's the way it works. You ask for answers, you cry for clarity, and when it shows up, you wave it off like it's coincidence. You call it luck, timing, imagination. But it keeps coming back, doesn't it? Same feeling, same face, same whisper you can't shake. Life doesn't hand you neon lights, flashing with certainty. It drops the same clue in your path again and again, until you're forced to admit it's not an accident. And the funny thing is, the more you try to ignore it, the louder it gets. Not with sound, but with weight. A heaviness you can't explain, a pull that drags you back no matter how far you run. You think you're clever, brushing it off. You think you can outsmart destiny, dodge the signs, convince yourself you're in control. But there's no hiding from what's meant. Every time you turn away, something pushes you right back to it. You hear a name when you're not listening, stumble across a memory you swore you buried. Feel that strange jolt in your chest when they're near. You tell yourself it's random. Random doesn't repeat itself. Random doesn't follow you into your dreams. Random doesn't haunt you in silence. The signs don't come dressed in fireworks. They come in patterns. The way the same conversation echoes from two different mouths. The way the same thought burns in your head until you finally speak it, only to find they were thinking it too. The way the universe seems to bend, pulling you into the same orbit no matter how many detours you take. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's the kind of certainty people pray for, then throw away because it feels too simple, too obvious, too undeniable. And here's the thing. Denial is always easier. It's easier to believe it's nothing. Easier to shrug it off. Easier to pretend you're not seeing what you're seeing. Because if you admit the signs are real, if you accept that they mean something, then you have to face what comes with them. Fear, responsibility, vulnerability. If you admit this connection is confirmed, then you can't hide behind the safety of uncertainty anymore. You have to step into it. And stepping into it means risking the parts of yourself you swore you'd keep locked away. But no matter how long you hide, the signs will wait. They're patient. They don't disappear just because you pretend not to see them. They keep knocking, gentle at first, then harder, until eventually it's impossible to ignore. And when you finally stop running, you'll realize they were never trying to convince you. It was you trying to convince yourself not to believe. Signs repeat until you notice, because life knows how blind people can be. Too busy, too distracted, too wounded to see what's right in front of them. So the signs circle back again and again until they break through the noise. Until they become so undeniable, so painfully obvious, that you're left with only two choices. Accept it or spend the rest of your life haunted by what you refuse to see. And deep down, you already know which one it is. You knew it the first time. You felt it before the proof, before the patterns, before the whispers started surrounding you. The signs didn't show up to create the truth. They showed up to confirm what you already felt. That's why they repeat. Because they're not there to convince your heart. Your heart already knows. They're there to silence your doubt. And until you finally let go of that doubt, they'll keep circling, keep pressing, keep reminding you that destiny doesn't need your permission to be real. True connection feels undeniable. You can try to explain it, break it down into logic, twist it into coincidence, but somewhere in your gut you know. It's that unshakable feeling that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. You meet thousands of people, shake hands, share laughs, pass by strangers every single day, and it's nothing. Empty. Forgettable. But then there's one, and suddenly it's different. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just this strange certainty that you can't put into words. You don't choose it. You don't plan it. You don't even expect it. It just arrives like it's been waiting. And once it's there, you can't pretend it isn't real. People like to play tough, pretend they're in control. They tell themselves, it's just attraction. It'll fade. It's nothing special. They bury the feeling under excuses, try to smother it with distractions. But the truth has a way of clawing through. That's what makes it undeniable. It doesn't need your permission. It doesn't wait for your approval. It just is. And no matter how much you resist, no matter how far you run, the connection pulls at you, drags you back, reminds you it's still alive. You feel it in the smallest things. The way silence doesn't feel empty with them. The way your thoughts slow down when they're near, like your chaos finally found a rhythm. The way their presence lingers, long after they're gone, echoing in your mind, like a song you can't stop humming. You can lie to yourself, but you can't escape the way your body reacts, the way your heart skips without asking, the way your mind wanders to them when it should be anywhere else. That's not an accident. That's not just chemistry. That's connection. And it's not always convenient. In fact, it rarely is. The timing doesn't line up. The circumstances don't make sense. Your fears scream louder than your faith. But the connection doesn't care about your schedule. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It shows up when it's meant to, not when it's comfortable. That's why it feels so overwhelming, because it cuts through all the barriers you've built, all the defenses you thought would protect you, and leaves you exposed. It doesn't ask if you want to feel. It demands that you do. You can deny attraction. You can dismiss infatuation. But connection breaks denial. You can't unfeel it. You can't unsee it. You can't go back to before you knew it was there. You can pretend, sure, but the pretending eats you alive. Because every time you try to fill the space with someone else, every time you try to move on like it was nothing, you'll feel the difference. You'll realize what's missing. You'll realize what you can't replace. And that realization hurts more than admitting the truth ever would. True connection doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't need to. It sits quietly in your chest, steady and unrelenting, until you finally admit it's there. That's why it feels undeniable. Not because it's loud, but because it's constant. It doesn't fade when the excitement dies down. It doesn't vanish when things get difficult. It lingers patiently, stubbornly, as if it knows something you don't. And maybe it does. Maybe it knows that what's real doesn't need to force itself. It simply waits until you're ready to face it. The world is full of noise, full of people, full of distractions. You could spend your whole life chasing empty sparks and calling it love. But when true connection shows up, it burns different. It doesn't scream for your attention. It changes the way you see everything else. That's why it feels undeniable. Because once you've touched it, once you've tasted it, once you've felt it in your bones, there's no going back to ordinary. Ordinary feels hollow. Ordinary feels fake. Ordinary feels dead. And that's the truth most people run from. They'd rather settle for comfort than admit they've found something that could break them open. Because true connection demands risk. It demands vulnerability. It demands you stop lying to yourself and finally face what's been in front of you the whole time. You can run, you can hide, you can deny it until you're blue in the face, but none of that changes what's real. And what's real doesn't let go just because you're scared. That's why true connection feels undeniable. Because deep down, you've already decided. You just haven't admitted it yet. Clarity often hides in silence. People expect answers to come loud, dramatic, wrapped in lightning bolts and thunderclaps, as if truth has to announce itself with a bang. But it doesn't. Truth is quiet. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't shout over your noise. It waits. And in the moments where the world finally shuts up, when the distractions fade, when it's just you and your thoughts, that's when clarity creeps in. Not as a scream, but as a whisper you can't shake. The kind of whisper that gnaws at you, follows you, unsettles you, because deep down you already know it's right. That's why people fear silence. It strips away the excuses, the justifications, the little lies you use to drown out the truth. When everything gets quiet, you're left with the raw, unfiltered reality of what you feel. And it scares you because once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You can ignore noise. You can argue with chaos. But you can't argue with that cold, steady voice that surfaces when nothing else is in the way. Silence is a mirror, and clarity hides inside it. Think about it. How many times have you been surrounded by people, distracted by chatter, busy enough to keep yourself from thinking, and you felt fine? Then later, when you're alone, when the noise fades, when there's no one to perform for, suddenly the truth shows its face. The silence doesn't invent it. It just unmasks it. That's why clarity hides there. Because only in the stillness can you stop pretending long enough to actually feel. And the funny part is, clarity is never complicated. It's not a puzzle. It's not wrapped in riddles. It's simple, obvious, plain. But simple is uncomfortable. People want complicated answers so they can keep running in circles, convincing themselves they don't know what to do. Complicated keeps you busy. Simple forces you to act. That's why clarity comes quietly. It doesn't waste time with explanations. It just tells you what is. And what is can be terrifying because it leaves you no place to hide. Silence strips away illusions. You can lie to others. You can even lie to yourself in the noise, but in the quiet. The lies don't hold. You can't escape the pull you feel. The weight pressing on your chest, the certainty you keep trying to bury. That's why so many avoid silence at all costs. They fill their days with endless noise, endless distractions, endless chatter. Not because they're busy, because they're terrified. Terrified of what they'll hear when everything else stops. But clarity doesn't care about your fear. It waits. It waits until you're exhausted, until the distractions wear thin, until the mask slips, and then it surfaces again. Same answer, same truth, same undeniable pull. And every time it comes back, it feels stronger, not because it grew, but because your excuses grew weaker. Silence doesn't create clarity. It reveals it. And once it's revealed, you can't bury it again, not without tearing yourself apart in the process. And here's the cruel part. Clarity doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it tells you to let go of what you've been clinging to. Sometimes it tells you to face what you've been avoiding. Sometimes it tells you that the thing you've been running from is exactly where you're supposed to be. And that's why it hides in silence. Because in the noise, you dismiss it, laugh it off, argue with it. But in the silence, there's nowhere to run. You're forced to sit with it, to feel it, to acknowledge it. Even if you hate it, clarity is patient. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't shove itself down your throat. It just waits in the quiet, repeating itself until you're ready to stop lying. And the more you resist, the heavier it feels, the harder it presses, until eventually the silence becomes unbearable. That's the signal. That's how you know clarity is speaking. When the quiet isn't peaceful anymore, when it's loud enough to rattle you, when it doesn't let you rest, it's not punishing you. It's forcing you to finally see what's been right in front of you the whole time. So when everything gets quiet, when the world stops spinning for just a moment, pay attention. That's where the answers are. Not in the chaos, not in the shouting, not in the endless search for proof. Clarity hides in silence, because silence is the only place you're honest enough to hear it. And once you hear it, the noise will never fool you again. Doubt battles what the heart already knows. That's the war inside, isn't it? The heart whispers one thing, steady, certain, stubborn. But the mind is a noisy little monster. It questions. It twists, it plays tricks, making you second. Guess what you've already felt deep in your bones. The heart speaks in truth, the mind in fear. The heart says, this is it. And the mind says, but what if you're wrong? And so you spin, caught between something pure and something poisoned, trying to figure out which voice to trust. Doubt is clever. It doesn't scream, you're wrong. No, it whispers, are you sure? Just enough to plant the seed. Just enough to shake the certainty you thought you had. And once doubt takes root, It grows fast, choking everything in its path. It convinces you to replay every word, every look, every sign, searching for cracks, searching for mistakes. The heart doesn't work like that. The heart doesn't keep score, it just knows. But the mind builds walls out of fear because doubt is its favorite weapon. And the cruelest part, doubt feels safer. It convinces you that questioning is protection, that hesitation is wisdom, that pulling back is strength. But really, doubt is just fear dressed in reason. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being wrong. Fear of losing something before you've even had it. The heart already knows. But the mind doesn't like not being in control, so it wages war, tearing apart the certainty, demanding proof, demanding guarantees that life will never give. You've felt it before. That pull in your chest. That strange peace when you're with them. That voice in the silence that says, "This is yours." That's the heart. It doesn't care about logic. It doesn't need evidence. It just recognizes what's real. And every time you feel it, for a moment you believe it. But then the mind swoops in. What if you're imagining it? What if it's one-sided? What if you're blinded by hope? And just like that, doubt shatters the clarity you already had. The irony is that doubt never fights fair. It doesn't care about truth. It only cares about control. It'll take one tiny crack and stretch it into a canyon. It'll take one unanswered question and turn it into 1,000. It'll turn whispers of fear into roars that drown out the steady rhythm of the heart. But here's the difference. The heart doesn't need to fight back. It doesn't argue. It doesn't shout. It just keeps knowing. And that's what makes doubt so maddening. Because no matter how many battles the mind wins, the heart never surrenders. That's why people feel torn in two. Because no matter how loud the doubt gets, it can't erase what the heart already knows. It can bury it, cover it, hide it under layers of fear, but it can't kill it. That truth lingers, waiting for the day you're tired of fighting yourself. And when that day comes, when you've exhausted every excuse, every justification, every clever reason to stay away, the heart is still there, whispering the same thing it whispered the first time. People waste years in this war. Doubt keeps them frozen, afraid to move, afraid to trust, afraid to admit what they feel. They keep waiting for the mind to line up with the heart, for the logic to finally approve what the soul already chose. But logic never approves. Logic always finds another hole, another reason, another what if. And all the while, the heart stays steady, holding the truth that you keep pretending you don't see. The tragedy isn't that people doubt. The tragedy is that they let doubt win. They let fear disguise itself as caution. Let hesitation disguise itself as wisdom. Let overthinking strangle the simple truth. They call it being realistic, but really, it's just being scared. And in the end, all doubt does is delay the inevitable. Because the heart doesn't forget. And the truth doesn't change just because you're too afraid to accept it. The heart already knows. It always knew. Doubt is just the noise that tries to bury it. But no matter how deep you bury it, no matter how many times you silence it, The truth has a way of clawing back to the surface. And every time it does, you're reminded that the war was never between right and wrong. It was between fear and faith. And fear only wins if you let it. Destiny doesn't need loud proof. People are obsessed with signs, with miracles, with thunder from the heavens announcing every step they're supposed to take. They want clarity wrapped in explosions, flashing lights pointing the way, undeniable evidence that screams, "This is it." But destiny doesn't play by those rules. It doesn't need to shout to be real. It doesn't need to put on a show to be true. It shows up quietly, steadily, in ways so subtle you almost miss it, until you realize it's been there all along, guiding you without asking for recognition. The loudest moments aren't the ones that matter most. The truth slips in through the cracks, in the details you ignore, in the coincidences you swear don't mean anything. But how many times does something have to repeat before it stops being coincidence? How many times does the same path open, the same face appear, the same feeling strike, before you admit it's not random? Destiny doesn't need fireworks because it has consistency. It has patterns. It has weight. It doesn't convince you with volume. It convinces you with persistence. The problem is, people don't trust quiet answers. They think if it's real, it should shake the ground. They think if it's meant to be, it should feel like lightning striking. But the truth, lightning burns out. Fireworks fade. Noise dies. What lasts is steady. What's real is calm. Destiny doesn't come to impress you. It comes to anchor you. It doesn't explode in your face. It roots itself in your soul. And that's why people miss it. Because they're too busy chasing the loud and ignoring the certain. You've felt it before. That strange peace that doesn't make sense. That quiet pull that doesn't fade no matter how much you argue with it. That's destiny. It doesn't demand your attention with chaos. It just waits for you to stop pretending you don't see it. And deep down, you always feel the difference. Everything loud eventually feels hollow, but the quiet things, they echo, they stay, they grow.